Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J, and today we wanted to talk about Star Wars. The final movie in the sequel trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker, just premiered. Although the movie was leaked months ago, and a lot of the leaks ended up being true. It's crazy that something like that happened to such a high-profile film, but it's also really disappointing, since those leaks didn't exactly make for satisfying storytelling. Disney bought this franchise for good money, and they could have done something really great with it, but that's not what we got. The hype was real back in 2015, but this series was mishandled from the beginning. Back in April, Mark Hamill tweeted this picture of what could have been, with the original cast back together. Twitter got really mad at him for this, even though he was right. These are some of the most well-known and beloved characters in film history, not just science fiction. The first movie in the sequel trilogy could have been an epic adventure with the gang back together, which also had them passing the torch on to these new characters. I think this would have been a really smart move for Disney, but instead of getting the band back together, they killed off Han before he got to reunite with Luke. I understand that Harrison Ford wanted out of this franchise, and that's fine. They could have still killed him off. Just do it in a way that's a proper send-off to his character, cause in the movie it came off more like shock value than anything else. At least in our opinion. And sadly, Carrie Fisher passed away a few years ago, so now they're using CGI and unused footage from the previous movies to force her into this one, which kind of feels disrespectful to me. And then there's how they completely misunderstood the fundamentals of Luke Skywalker's character, something Mark Hamill was very unhappy about, which is completely understandable. He tried to address the issue with director Rian Johnson, but he had no interest in what Mark had to say, and as a result, the character that was portrayed in The Last Jedi was basically the exact opposite of Luke Skywalker, a bitter old hermit who drinks alien milk straight from an alien. I understand it's been 30 years in universe, and a lot can change in that time, but the problem is all of it was off screen, so there was no setup for the audience to see, especially since Disney threw out all of the extended universe for Star Wars, making it not canon. So now we haven't seen Luke since Return of the Jedi. As an audience member, this doesn't come off as a subversion of expectations, like they said they were going for. It seems more like they just didn't get him to begin with. Before we continue, I'm going to put up a spoiler warning now for The Rise of Skywalker. So if you haven't seen the leaks somehow, or you just want to see the movie before listening to any reviews, maybe check it out first. With that being said, Rey was revealed to be Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter. It's interesting how Frozen 2 also did an evil twist grandfather. I hope that's just a coincidence and not some kind of new trend, because I'm really not a fan of it. I think this was their attempt to explain why Rey was so talented with the Force despite not having any training, and maybe a callback to the Luke and Darth Vader revelation. And it turns out Palpatine has been the big bad of the sequel trilogy the entire time, pulling the strings from the shadows when no one else was the wiser. Snoke was just a puppet that Palpatine was controlling. It's pretty obvious that none of this was planned in advance, and I also think it wasn't the right road to go down. It completely undermines Anakin Skywalker's character arc. His entire redemption revolved around him killing Palpatine and setting everything right, but now it's been undone. And in the end, Rey takes the Skywalker name, so the Rise of Skywalker was referring to Rey, while all the actual Skywalkers end up dead by the end of the movie, and a Palpatine took their name. And as if destroying Anakin Skywalker's legacy wasn't bad enough, she also buried his lightsaber in the sand.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
It's not that I don't like Rey, although I do think she's kinda boring. I just don't like how the writing puts her above everybody else and shoves all the other characters to the side, including the original heroes and villains. And it's disappointing because she really didn't have to be boring. She had potential as a character. It's just that they started throwing everything at the wall. Suddenly she's a Palpatine, and she's basically the most important person in the galaxy. She might as well have been the chosen one instead of Anakin. At least she trained more in this movie, but she was still able to pull off some moves that were pretty out there even with her training, like the Force Lightning, or cutting Kylo Ren's ship's wing off from the outside. It ends up making her boring because there's no tension revolving around her character. We know that she's going to be able to pull herself out of anything, and pull out some crazy move to get her out of trouble, so I didn't have to worry about her throughout the movie. She also had a bad habit of running off on her own. This led to Chewie being caught by the First Order because he was trying to get her so they could leave, and even after this she still runs off on her own. It kind of felt like the others were just being dragged along with the plot, and that she was being pretty reckless. So in the end, while I appreciate they tried to flesh out Rey's character, it ultimately fell flat. I think a lot of characters ended up getting the short end of the stick in this series, which includes a lot of the new characters. Finn had great setup, and really could have been the new lead character of the sequel series. Imagine a character going from a stormtrooper to a Jedi, but instead all that potential was wasted. He kind of ended up getting pushed to the side, that way Rey can be the lead of these movies. In the last movie, he got stuck going on a side quest to a casino planet with Rose, after she tased him because of, let's just say, a misunderstanding. And sure, they can go on this side quest, but was that really the best use of his character? He actually made me feel sorry for stormtroopers, because now they're not nameless, faceless goons. They're people who were taken from their homes as children, and then forced to be nameless, faceless goons. So every time they're mowing down a bunch of stormtroopers, I can't help but think that could be another Finn. Then in this movie we find out there are other stormtrooper defectors, and I would have loved to see more of that, but we're just told about it. It might have been cool if Finn had basically started a civil war within the First Order, where some stormtroopers wanted to defect and others wanted to stay loyal, but we don't get any of that. Most of the stormtroopers are still nameless and faceless, and they're there to get mowed down. At least he got to go on the main adventure in this movie, but he also spent a lot of time running after Rey. It kind of made me wonder if he has a crush on her. Did anyone else feel like that? Poe was there, and Chewie, and yeah, they were worried about her, but not to that extent. Like when he tried to reach her when she was fighting Kylo Ren, after she needlessly went off on her own to find the Sith Wayfinder on the Death Star, and she used the Force to push him away, like she was saying, "This is my fight, stay out of it." Or maybe she was trying to protect him, but that's what I read from it. That former stormtrooper lady was there, but she had to hold him back, because he still tried to go after her even though the waves were way too high. I get that they're friends, but it seemed like he was really singularly focused on her, and I didn't feel like he had enough of his own arc going on. Did he ever mention what he wanted to tell her? Cause I don't remember him doing so unless I missed it. I was actually kind of surprised we didn't see much of Rose in this movie. I figured she was gonna go with them, but she stayed behind. I thought she was meant to be a bigger character than that. I like that she still wanted to fight for and believed in the rebellion even though her sister died fighting for the rebellion, and she was heartbroken about it, but I appreciated that she was still there for the cause. But I feel like everything after that with Rose was kind of a misstep. Was sending her on a casino planet side quest really the best use of her character? Plus, her stopping Finn's sacrifice seemed like it contradicted with the movie's other messages about sacrificing yourself for others, like with her own sister, but then she didn't get much to do in this movie. Also, she kissed Finn at the end of the last movie, and in this one it kind of felt like they were pretending that never happened. That's what I got anyway. I did feel like this movie treated Poe a lot better than the last movie. That whole beef between him and Holdo was awful. Holdo, just communicate. What kind of a leader are you? She was acting so high and mighty, but her plan didn't even account for windows, so most of them died anyway. I guess they wanted to teach Poe to not be a hero, but was this a lesson that Poe really needed to learn, or did they just want to force a message onto the audience? I was also kind of surprised that Leia made him general. She seemed annoyed with him last movie, but I guess good for him. I didn't mind how he had that talk with Lando about how he was supposed to move forward, and feeling overwhelmed with all this new responsibility, and Lando giving him that pep talk. I actually really liked Lando in this movie. He was fun and charismatic. It is sad that all his buddies are dead now, except for Chewie, and the droids made it too, but still, missed opportunities. I guess the last character to talk about is Kylo. He was redeemed in this movie, and I don't mind that, although it was a little rushed, but I guess it can't be helped. I've never been the biggest Kylo fan. I've always thought he was kinda whiny. His redemption involved both of his parents, which I think was a good move. I don't mind his mom reaching out to him, but of course she had to die. It didn't feel like the right time, but they probably only had so much footage. Then his dad reaches out to him, as I guess a vision. They have a conversation that calls back to The Force Awakens, which was an alright touch. I'm glad he was able to reconcile with his parents. I just think it would have been more satisfying if they had done more with their characters. Like if Han had been able to meet up with Luke and Lando, the band could have gotten back together and then he could have died tragically. I think it would have made him reconnecting with his son have more impact, but instead the sequel trilogy felt like it focused more on Kylo and Rey than Kylo and his parents. I'm not much of a shipper, but I guess course, Reylo is canon, only to sink. I wasn't really happy that he died because he is the last of the Skywalkers, and I think that he could have moved on with his life, and lived on in their memory, but I'm also pretty apathetic at this point, so I'm not all that torn up about it. Overall, this movie felt more like a fan fiction than the final chapter to a trilogy, but that's kind of been an issue throughout this entire sequel trilogy. It's clear that nothing was planned out from the beginning, especially since they ignored George Lucas's notes on what he had planned for the series going forward. Then the second movie took things way off the rails, and this course correction just felt forced. Hux was a spy for the rebellion all along? Seriously? No, he wasn't. Overall, we're just pretty apathetic towards the whole sequel trilogy, and that's really not a good feeling to be left with. But that's just our opinion. What did you guys think? Would you have liked to see that reunion that Mark Hamill suggested with the original cast? What did you think of The Rise of Skywalker? And how do you think the sequel trilogy could have been improved overall? We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everybody. We really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video. Bye everyone. Bye guys.